Hey guys, tonight we drift into one of the most curiously quiet revolutions ever recorded in history. The time a king, for reasons no one fully understood, perhaps not even him, decided to place a tax on facial hair. Yes, barbers, whiskers, beards of all shapes, lengths and densities. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? And what time is it there now? Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up on a morning that should be completely ordinary, if not for one slightly out of place detail. There's a piece of paper pinned to your door, and it's not a love note nor a flood warning, it's a royal decree. With a golden seal, red ribbon and letters that already exude bureaucracy, it begins in a noble way. To all subjects with facial hair. You blink, keep reading. It's real. A tax, an official tariff on the use of facial hair. The amount varies depending on the length, thickness and disconcerting aesthetic presence. You run your hand over your chin, bearded, and now, officially, taxable. Outside, the village is already buzzing. Men of all kinds are gathered in the square. Some are confused, others are angry. And one or two who strangely seem proud, perhaps because their beards now have market value. A baker comments, "They'll finally recognize the cultural importance of my goatee." Another answers, "Fiscal importance at most." You walk among them, feeling the curious looks. No one really understands how this will work. Someone suggests that there will be a length inspector. Another is afraid of a scale to weigh the hair. An elderly lady says that in her youth she heard stories of a duke who judged eyebrows that were too arched. Historically, you'll recall, bizarre taxes aren't all that uncommon. There have been taxes on windows, hats, even salt, so why not facial hair? Still, there's something different in the air. It's not just indignation, it's a feeling that something intimate is being touched. Because for many people, a beard isn't just hair, it's identity, it's stubbornness, it's winter without a scarf. And now it's also revenue for the royal treasury. Historians still debate whether this type of economic measure had a real effect, or whether it was just another attempt by the king to prove that he could control whatever he wanted. Some say it was to finance wars. Others, and you prefer to believe these, say it was pure unresolved vanity. You walk away from the square wondering, will anyone really pay, or will this be the beginning of the most hairy revolt in history? You wake up the next day to the sound of scissors. Not inside your house, not yet, but outside, very close by. A metallic hum, punctuated by nervous whispers and the occasional muffled cry of, "Ouch!" Easy on that. You get up, push back the linen curtain at the window and see, the village's central courtyard has been transformed into a communal shaving salon. Men of all ages sit on makeshift benches, crates, barrels, even rocks, with cloths thrown over their shoulders, and expressions divided between resignation and panic. The barbers, once modest shopkeepers with loose schedules, now look like generals on the battlefield. One of them wields a straight razor, as if it were a sacred sword. You leave, hurriedly putting on your sandals. Outside, the air smells of soap, sweat, and tension. The beards fall in clumps to the ground, like leaves in autumn. A little boy cries because his father will look like a sick fisherman. Another man holds a mirror and gazes at his newly discovered face, as if seeing a stranger returned from exile. You approach a man with a long beard, white as aged cotton. He holds his chin firmly. "I won't pay or shave it," he says, with the firmness of someone who has already survived 2 plagues and 3 marriages. "This beard has history. It grew with me. It withstood the winter of 47, the drought of 52, and the Archbishop's endless speech in 61. You respect the feeling, because there is something there, something symbolic. Historically, kings and rulers have imposed taxes in this way, not just to raise money, but to mark their territory. A silent way of saying, even your face is mine. And there were always 2 groups, those who paid and those who resisted with every thread of honor. The square is divided. Some shave, some resist. Others, more strategic, simply reduce the length. "From the chin down, you're exempt," suggests a young man who cut his beard at an inclined angle. and now looks like a poorly planned Renaissance sculpture. A court scribe arrives on horseback, dismounts solemnly, and pins a new sheet to the stone mural. Beards that are trimmed but still exceed the actual measurement will continue to be subject to the tariff. A murmur spreads. The scribe collects coins from some barbers, the fee for a temporary license to handle blades. You start to realize this is becoming an industry. In the background, a merchant sets up a stall with combs, oils, and a strange wooden instrument called a hair dignity meter. You pass by a young man who is observing the scene with a notebook in his hands. What are you writing down? Social reactions to the partial loss of hairy identity, he answers seriously. It could become a thesis or poetry. Historians still debate whether this tax arose out of economic necessity or pure whim. But the fact is, few decrees have mobilized so much sentiment with so little ink. You feel your own beard. Still there. But for how long? You decide to take a walk to clear your head, but you can't escape the topic of the day. Beards have become a national obsession. On every corner there are heated discussions, comparisons, even jokes. The really bad kind that only come about when people try to laugh at their own despair. Now I see why the king is so smooth. He's charging us for beards to buy his. You force a smile. In the local tavern where harvests, chicken fights, and the never-changing weather are usually discussed, this is all anyone can talk about. A group of men with faces red from poorly sharpened blades discuss whether growing only a mustache is a form of protest or creative submission. A woman comments holding a jug of thin beer. Beard or no beard, a man who cries for hair doesn't deserve half the bread. You laugh, inside, because deep down, you also feel the dilemma. That strange connection between the face you see in the mirror and the world that tries to shape it with decrees. You walk up a narrow, uneven cobblestone street to the Old Craftsman's Guild Hall. Inside, an extraordinary meeting is taking place. Carpenters, shoemakers, blacksmiths, and even 2 calligraphers, all with beards of varying lengths and thicknesses, are deciding their next move. Either we pay or we cut it, said the leader. A man whose beard looked as if it had been hand-shaped by an absent-minded deity. What if we refuse? The tax is real, so is the punishment. You learn that the penalty for non-payment varies. It can be a fine, days of forced labor, or, the most humiliating, compulsory scraping, done by soldiers with horse brushes. You imagine the scene. And the embarrassment is almost worse than the blade. We need a symbolic solution, says a young man, thin and with a patchy beard. Something that shows we're not against the kingdom, but we're not on our knees either. Silence, until someone suggests, what if we dyed our beards, with ink, blue ink or golden? If they can't take away our beard, let them see the pride with which we carry it. Historically, there are records of similar silent protests. Peasants who wore the wrong color of clothing on holy days. Tailors who sewed hidden messages into the linings of their clothes. In times of repression, creativity is the last resort. You leave the salon with the feeling that something is going to change. As he turns the corner, he sees an old man in front of a portable mirror, dyeing his beard. With a mixture of red clay and olive oil, a boy watches, curious. Why are you doing this? Because if you're going to pay for something nice, you smile. Maybe he's right. In the late afternoon, when the bell tower rings and the golden light falls over the city, one thing is certain. The king can charge for the beards, but their meaning remains with the person who wears them. The next day you wake up to the faint smell of dye in the air, something between burnt wood and crushed flowers. You peer out the window and barely recognize the faces in the village. Blue beards, gold beards, beards with diagonal stripes in shades of rust and copper. Some are exaggerated, as if they've come from a makeshift theater. Others are subtle, just a hint of color at the tips, as if they're whispering protest. Instead of shouting, you walk to the market. Among the vegetables, salted fish, and crumbly cheeses, the topic is the same. They've run out of paints. Now they're using boiled wine, beets, and even egg yolks. It doesn't last long, comments a lady as she stirs a cauldron of dark paint, but dignity also needs a touch-up sometimes. In the center of the square, a group of young people organize a spontaneous parade. They march with their hands clasped behind their backs, like nobles without a castle. One holds a wooden sign that reads, "If my beard pays taxes, let it shine, like the sun." You wonder if this is the beginning of a revolt or a new fad. The curious thing is that the climate itself seems to cooperate. The sky is clear, the air is soft. Birds watch from rooftops, perhaps confused by humanity's new visual codes. In the palace, however, the mood is not so light. Discreet sources, because every town has its trusted gossips, say that the king did not find it funny. "Do you call this colorful obedience?" he would have asked with a sigh of bored crowns. Historians still debate whether kings like this really reacted with anger to symbolic protests, or whether they simply feigned contempt to keep their tempers in check. The fact is that painting became a symbol. And symbols, as we know, are difficult to categorize. You pass a barber, once a serious man, now almost a local star. He mixes pigments in a mortar and asks, "Do you want a discreet resistance or golden rebellion tone?" You choose the second one. The brush touches your beard with precision and lightness. It's strange, almost intimate, as if you were signing a manifesto with your face. When you look in the mirror, something changes. It's not the color. It's the feeling of having decided something on your own. "There you go," says the barber. "Now you are part of the movement." "What movement?" He smiles. "The one that doesn't have a name yet but already has a color." And you walk through the square with your golden beard blowing in the wind, while other men, and even some women with dyed eyebrows in solidarity, greet you with their chins slightly raised. It's the beginning of something, maybe confusing, maybe foolish, but definitely something. You wake up on the third day of the beard tax to a new sound in the square, the rhythmic clink of spoons against pots. It's not a war alarm, it's a protest, domestic, peaceful, and slightly off-key. Women hang kettles from windows, boys ring goat bells, and most curiously, all the men have their chins up, without beards. Yes. The village decided, in an almost rehearsed silence, to shave everything. You go for a walk and come across an unlikely scene. Barbers have set up makeshift stands on street corners, and there are lines of people waiting. Men laugh as they stare at their own reflection, their faces clean for the first time in decades. One man looks at his own jaw and says, "My jaw has changed in the past decade. What a pleasure to see it back." You smile, walk up to a barber and ask, "Is it free today?" "Today is for the country," he replies, raising the razor with comical solemnity. You sit up. The blade glides gently, as if undoing an old web of stubbornness and habit. The air touches your skin with a lightness you had forgotten. "What? Now?" you ask the barber as you stand up. "Now no one can be taxed," he says, "because there is nothing to tax." Historically, shaving one's beard has been a symbol of mourning, renewal, and even submission. But in that context, it seemed like something new, a polite revolt, a silent scream, a polite no with soap. You return to the square and notice that something has changed. Not just the faces, the energy. People seem to walk faster, speak more quietly, as if they are waiting for the palace to respond, and she comes. In the late afternoon, a messenger appears, mounted, wearing a cloak too black for the heat, and a scroll sealed with red wax. The crowd gathers. You approach, your face still stinging slightly from the blade. The messenger reads, "By royal decree, all those who do not have a beard are exempt from tax." A collective sigh, relief, and, at the same time, a doubt. Because right after, he adds, "However, those who shaved for convenience rather than conviction may be taxed retroactively." The silence that follows is almost funny. "How will they know the difference?" someone whispers. "Will you judge by the sincerity?" "Of the chin," says another. You feel the tension return, like smoke returning to the room after incense has gone out. Historians still debate whether this retroactive clause was actually applied, or whether it was merely a threat to dampen public enthusiasm. Some suggest it was a way to keep fear alive. Others suggest the king simply wanted to prolong his sense of control, But at that moment, the effect is clear. So, what do we do now? Someone asks. Do we hope to grow again? Says another. You look around and see the barbers smiling discreetly. Because one way or another, their services will be needed again. And you, standing there in the middle of the square, beardless and uncertain, realize that the tax has changed something bigger than appearance. The mood of the village changed, the way people walked, the sound of conversations. It even changed the way people look at each other, and maybe, just maybe, it has begun to change the king as well. You spend the next few days observing a new phase of the village, the period of repentant beards. Men, once determined to defy the tax, now spend more time in front of polished mirrors than in wheat fields. Some touch their own faces in sadness. Others try to glue goat hairs together with tallow and flour. One or another even sews chin wigs with cotton thread and brush bristles. It's funny and melancholic. You see a young man in the square trying to blow hairs off his skin like they were seeds in the wind. Maybe they'll grow faster that way, he says, seriously. Or maybe never again, replies an old man, rubbing his smooth chin as if it were an Egyptian curse. Uncertainty hangs in the air, because the conviction clause is still alive. And nobody knows what's worse, having a beard and paying or not having one and being investigated. Some try to escape the ambiguity by cultivating a new style, long mustaches that avoid the chin. One gentleman walks with two thin strands coiled like golden snakes above his lips. He calls them the survivors. You hear confusing conversations all around. If I leave just one sideburn, is it still a beard? What if the beard is only internal, spiritual? If I dream about her, do I have to pay? Historically, taxes on personal characteristics, such as clothing, hair, beards, were not unheard of. Tsar Peter the Great instituted a similar tax in the 17th century, requiring Russian men to shave to conform to the modern European look. And yes, he handed out medallions to payers, engraved with the words, "A beard is folly." But your king seems less interested in nonsense and more in chaos. You hear rumors that he convened a secret council of barbers, philosophers, and tax collectors to debate categories of growth. A new term emerges, beardability. You take a deep breath. In a world where barbability is an office agenda, anything is possible. So you decide to walk to the countryside to clear your head. And there you find something that makes you stop a stone. On it, a bone comb. And next to it, engraved on the ground with charcoal, hair freedom. Of course, it became a movement. Back in the village, the young men are organizing a symbolic march, all with faces drawn in black paint, as if they were wearing invisible beards. You watch, both amused and touched, because deep down, this whole story was never just about facial hair. It was about boundaries, about identity, about how even the smallest things can provoke big reactions. Historians still debate whether this invisible beard movement had any real political impact. Some say it inspired future rebellions. Others said it was just a funny phase in the royal calendar. But for you, it was more than that. It was a reminder that even the absurd can be resistance. And sometimes the best response to a king who taxes you on beards is to draw one with charcoal and keep walking. The sound of an out-of-tune lute echoes from a window as you walk through the village, and you realize that now even the songs have beards. Literally. 3 hairs on the chin, a tax in the pocket. Sings a minstrel, smiling in a corner. Children repeat the verses as they play hide-and-seek behind barrels, and old men in the market stamp their feet in time to the song, half out of habit, half out of irony. The village did not remain silent. It responded with humor. You enter a tavern to escape the heat. Inside, the atmosphere is stuffy but full of energy. A mural on the wall displays caricatures, the king with a false beard, the royal advisor trying to measure a mustache with a ruler, and even a drawing of a cat wearing a false beard made of wool. Above it, a title written in dark ink, Museum of Persecuted Beards. You laugh, but he also realizes laughter has become a tool, a way of coping. Historically, many societies have responded to oppression with satire. From Greek theater to French revolutionary cartoons mocking power has always been a way of deflating it. The beard here has become a symbol, and a joke and a protest all at the same time. You approach the counter and order something light. The waitress, a woman with curious eyes and a sharp sense of humor, serves you a glass of ice water and asks, "So are you going to pay or are you going to scratch it?" You respond with a smile and a sip. There's no point in discussing politics under a thatched roof. She points to the back of the tavern. "We have meetings on Fridays." The Beardless by Choice Club. No judgment, just cookies and advice. You are grateful. You don't know if it will show up, but you like knowing that it exists. In the square, there is now a new makeshift monument, a wooden sculpture showing a face, half-shaved, half-bearded. A red scarf is tied around the neck. Around it, dried flowers, coins, and small mirrors, an altar to ambiguity. You wonder who did it. Nobody says, and it's better this way. At night, you watch the village grow quiet. Torches light. The air cools. And an eerie stillness hangs in the air, as if everyone is waiting for the king's next order to involve eyelashes or nose hairs. You sit under a tree and rest your head. In the silence, you can almost hear the invisible beards growing all over the village, slowly, discreetly, proudly, because if the king wanted control, he got something else, got identity. The next day dawns with the smell of smoke and fresh bread. You wake up to a rhythmic sound coming from the street, a soft tapping sound, as if someone were stitching the floor with shoes. When you go outside, you discover that it is a procession, not of protest but of style. Men and women parade around with the most unusual beards you've ever seen. He has a beard braided with golden ribbons, a beard shaped like a ladder, one in a spiral, the other divided into segments like a tangerine. There's even a guy with a smooth face, but a hat that supports a fake beard made of dyed straw, and everyone follows in silence. Marching as if they were monks in devotion to the absurd, you join the watching crowd, some with their hands in their pockets to hide their laughter, others with tears in their eyes, from laughter, from remembering, or maybe both. At the end of the street, a tent was set up. Above it a sign, "Temporary exhibition beards that paid." Inside, unusual pieces, an old shoemaker's beard preserved in resin, the receipt for the first tax paid signed with a mustache drawing, and a wooden urn with an inscription, "Here lie hairs of indignation." You talk to the curator, a thin young man with an electric gaze. The beard became a flag, and he says, "And the tax, the needle that sewed it all together." Historically, there are parallels. In Peter the Great's Russia, men wore medallions with sarcastic inscriptions after paying the beard tax. In revolutionary France, wigs became an insult. The body has always been a battleground. Here it's time for facial hair. You ask if this is all a movement or just a passing fad. The curator smiles. Every fashion is a movement in disguise, and every tax generates art, sooner or later. Outside, a group of young people sing improvised verses. If your beard is hard for you, let it grow double. If you want silence, let there be laughter. You applaud with your eyes. Later, as you pass a fountain, you see a man carefully washing his face, as if preparing the ground for a new battlefield. You understand. Because in this kingdom, the face is not just a face, it is manifest. And beards today don't just grow with hormones, they grow with intention. Night falls with that kind of silence that feels charged. It's not an absence of sound, it's suspended expectation, as if the entire city is holding its breath, by a whisker. You're sitting on the stone steps of the central square, watching the torches light up around the clock tower. Soon, the king will speak. And everyone knows, whether it's to revoke, reinforce, or reinvent, he always has something to say when the people start making poetry out of facial hair. The crowd slowly gathers, peasants with smooth cheeks, nobles with strategically shortened beards to pay less, artists with hair dyed in improbable colors. Even a group of barbers stands in silence, as if awaiting instructions from fate itself. You notice a curious detail. There are more women today, some with robes that resemble judgment, veils, others with clothes embroidered with images of beards, yes, embroidered. An elderly woman holds a cane, whose tip is a small bearded bust carved in wood. Historically, when absurd laws are introduced, the popular response has rarely been straightforward. Satire, parade, embroidery, and exaggeration have always been more effective than shouting. The Romans mocked corrupt senators with plays, the English with anonymous pamphlets, and now, in this kingdom, the beard has become a stage. The king finally appears on the stone balcony, wearing a purple robe with a high collar, very high, perhaps to disguise the absence of any trace of a beard. He raises a dark glass cup and says, "Citizens, I see that beards have grown not only on faces but in hearts." The crowd falls silent. Someone in the background clears their throat in a comical tone. "My intention was not oppression, but order. It was not persecution, but standard." And yet, he pauses dramatically. "I was overcome by my own hair." A light laugh runs like wind through the crowd. "Therefore," he continues, "I declare that the tax will be maintained, with exemption for artistic beards." A murmur, a collective whisper. "Any beard that brings beauty, originality, or reflection to public life will be celebrated," he says, "not taxed," and completes, "May our chins from now on be free." But responsible, a troubadour to his left pulls out a lute and begins to play an unexpectedly beautiful hymn called the Song of the Unobliged Chin. Someone accompanies with a flute. A bread vendor begins to distribute mustache-shaped bread rolls. You take a deep breath. And that beards have not been completely legalized, but they have gained recognition as a form of expression. And that, in this realm, is practically a revolution. Historians still debate whether the king's decision was calculated, or whether he simply gave in to the pressure of seeing his own image embroidered on pillowcases with the inscription, "Enemy of the Face." But the result is there. Laughter, music, bread, and a lightness that had not been felt for a long time. You walk back home with a mustachioed piece of bread in your hand, and for the first time since the beginning of everything, he feels that this story, as absurd as it may be, is actually making sense. The night passed with dreams filled with floating mustaches and braided hair crowns. When you wake up, the sun has already filtered through the windows, and the air smells of freshly baked bread and beard oil. Yes, someone in the industry seems to have taken advantage of the legal turn of events to launch a new product. You walk through the streets with that lightness that only comes when a collective absurdity begins to become legend. The mountain city is not only alive, and it is creative, and the beards, oh, they are better than ever. At the intersection of Rua dos Alfaiates and Travessa do Sobrancelho Real, a group of young people set up an improvised stand, exhibition of artistic beards. There are categories. He has the beard in the shape of a philosophical spiral, the beard that imitates the castle wall, and of course the beard that hides small poems sewn in threads. One of the judges is an old cat, sitting on a crate with a scarf around his neck. No one knows why, but everyone respects his decision. You watch as a 12-year-old boy displays his creation, a mini library made of string tied to small scrolls. He doesn't have a beard, but he brought his grandfather's beard in a glass jar, saying that hair art is also an inheritance. The jury approves. Historically, this type of popular adaptation is nothing new. In many eras, people have responded to arbitrary rules with art. When blue ink was banned among the scribes of Balazar's court, they began to hide subversive verses in embroidery. When circle dancing was banned by northern religious advisors, straight-line tap dancing with double meanings emerged. Creativity, after all, is the beard of the soul. It grows where no one expects it. You approach a stand where a man who looks like a baker is selling bread braided in the shape of Viking beards. They're symbolic, he explains. Soft on the inside, firm on the outside. Like good diplomacy. You buy one. Of course you do. As you walk through the city, you notice the facades. Some houses now have curtains with fringes that imitate mustaches. The main barber shop has put up a new sign, "We are now also a gallery," and outside the palace, hanging like a flag, there is a large banner, a golden beard on a blue background. You didn't expect this. Not even the king, probably. But the city turned provocation into celebration, and that somehow seems more righteous than any tax repeal. You wonder how historians will explain this in the future. Maybe they'll say it was a quiet revolution. Maybe they'll laugh it off and pass it by. Or maybe, just maybe, they'll understand that all of this, the beards, the taxes, the art, wasn't about hair. It was about the right to exist in a absurdly authentic way. You bite your bread, beard. It's delicious. And between bites, you think if the next tax is on chops, you know. Just start embroidering. At the end of that afternoon, when the sky takes on a melancholic golden hue and the bells in the tower announce the moment when the city breathes more slowly, you encounter something unexpected, a procession. But not an ordinary procession. There are no torches or sacred statues. What parades down the main street is a giant beard made of fabric and straw, carried on the shoulders of 4 enthusiastic tailors. At the front, a marching band made up of trumpet apprentices and a percussionist with more desire than rhythm. The crowd follows along, laughing, singing, a melody you've never heard, but that sticks in your head like jelly on a child's finger. It's the Great Free Beard March, explains a man next to him, wearing a vest full of golden buttons in the shape of a razor. How long has this been around, you ask? Since yesterday, he answers. As if that were enough time for any tradition to gain value, you join the procession. Because how can you resist a crowd chanting verses like, "If you're going to pay for hair, let it be with pride and zeal"? During the march, improvised banners appear, sheets painted with witty slogans. More hair, less taxes. Beards are not a crime, they're culture. Goatees are resistance. Some children wear giant moustache costumes that cover their entire faces, tripping gleefully over their own steps. Historically, there are reports of popular festivals emerging in response to unusual decrees. The most famous of these is perhaps the Crooked Hat Festival, which emerged after the ban on asymmetrical adornments in the court of Tenebral. The population responded with weeks of parades, contests, and even plays where the hero always won, wearing a crooked hat, of course. The march continues to the front of the palace, where the guard, probably instructed to maintain composure, cannot help but smile. The atmosphere is one of mischievous respect, a celebration that, in essence, says, "We know how to laugh." Even if it's with taxes, you watch as a street artist performs with brushes dipped in brown paint, drawing stylized beards on the stone floor. A dog lies down nearby, as if it too is participating in the choreography. Suddenly, the palace gate creaks, it opens slowly, and at the top of the stairs he appears, the king himself, not surrounded by guards, nor dressed imposingly, but yes, with a light cape, a tired expression, and surprisingly a fake beard tied with blue ribbon under his chin. The silence is immediate. You hold your breath. The king raises a hand, not in command, but in greeting. As if to say, "Okay, you win, let's laugh together." Then he speaks without microphones, but with a voice that carries the echo of a long afternoon. "Ladies and gentlemen, this beard is heavy. But yours, light and free, has already taught me more than my advisors have in weeks." The crowd responds with applause that turns into a chorus, which turns into dance, which turns into history. You smile, and he thinks, perhaps, no tax in the world is a match for a city that has learned to laugh at itself and to make art out of what was once just irritation. The next morning, the palace is quieter than usual. Even the pigeons seem to avoid landing on the windows. You walk through the narrow corridors, hearing only the sound of your own footsteps and the sound of a royal attendant discreetly stumbling with a tea tray. The memory of the previous night still lingers in the air, of the crowd, of the king's fake beard, of the almost shy laugh he gave in front of all the people. You enter the audience room and find the monarch, without a beard, without the fake one and without the real one. He is smooth-faced, wearing a simple cotton shirt, looking down at the parchment with the tax decree, now folded in half and supporting a glass of mint water. "Good morning." "Your Majesty," and you say, trying to sound more awake than you are. "Good morning," he replies without taking his eyes off the crumpled paper. "Do you think I can repeal a tax without looking weak?" You smile gently. It's not every day a king asks something so human. Perhaps the people already think you are stronger than ever. He raises an eyebrow. "For wearing a fake beard? For listening?" He doesn't answer. He just stands up, walks to the window and looks out at the horizon where the city awakens. Merchants set up tents. Washerwomen chat as they wring colorful cloths. A dog barks at a pigeon, which doesn't pay. Attention. Life is back to normal. but now with a different tone. The problem was never the beard, the king says, almost to himself. It was the fear of appearing outdated, of losing control. Do you remember something you heard in the temple? Of wisdom. The authority that fears laughter no longer rules, it only watches. Historically, kings and rulers who have risked absurd reforms have almost always stumbled over the same stone. They forgot that the people are creative. And when creativity meets humor, even the most rigid decrees become origami paper. The E. Tax will be cancelled, the king finally declares. But I want the reason for it to be recorded, and I don't want to seem forced. I want to seem inspired. You nod, already imagining the scribes rushing to rewrite everything in a more poetic tone. And that's when an idea comes. Your Majesty, why not turn the fee into a festival? He turns to you, curious. Festival? An annual event. Instead of charging for beards, how about rewarding them? The longest, the most creative, the one that tells the best story. His eyes shine. The Royal Beard Fair. That's right, with music, poetry, braiding challenges, and a curly mustache contest. Historically, many traditions have emerged in this way, an attempt at control that, when recycled by popular wisdom, becomes a celebration. Carnival, for example, was born from religious rituals and the turn of the fiscal year. Today it is synonymous with partying color and a glitter. Oh, Ray Remas, you must be a counselor. I only slept a little. He nods. Then go rest. And tomorrow come up with ideas for the new festival's coat of arms. Something between a comb and a crown. You walk away, feeling the weight of history turning a corner. And deep down, you realize sometimes what starts as a tax ends as a parade. And perhaps that is the best possible ending for a story about beards. You wake to the distant sound of hammering. The night before, you dreamed of flying mustaches and kings surfing on beards braided like ship ropes. When you open your eyes, you realize that the dream may not have been as far from reality as you thought. Outside, the city is under construction. Not buildings, but structures. Wooden arches decorated with colorful fabrics, banners being hand-painted, and in the center of the main square, a round platform with a golden chair, shaped like a giant comb. The king took the idea of the festival seriously, very seriously. You stroll through the city as seamstresses debate the ideal length for a robe that honors short beards. A group of blacksmiths carve small medals in the shape of razor blades. And in front of the temple, two musicians tune flutes twice their normal size, planning a duet to The Ballad of the Bold Mustaches. Yes, everything is getting out of control, but in a charming way. You stop at a makeshift stall where a scribe sells honorary certificates of shaving. The line is already long. A young man with a completely smooth face buys two. He says he's going to stick one in his room and give the other to his mother, to prove that the beard is internal. You smile. Historically, public celebrations have been a social relief for tense governments. Ancient Rome had its games, the Chinese held lunar festivals, and even in remote villages in Europe, harvest festivals were filled with jokes about kings, priests, and talking sheep. It's almost as if people are saying, if we're going to work hard all year, at least let us laugh about it. Around the corner from the bakery, you'll meet the barber responsible for the first revolt. He's wearing a tunic embroidered with little bearded faces and holding a small pot of fig gel to style unruly hair. Was it you who invented this madness? He asks with a crooked smile. I only suggested that laughter might yield more than taxes. Well, you should know that. The barbershop will now be called Kingdom of the Beard, and my daughter will sing during the parade. You nod, surprised by the speed of change, and above all by the lightness that has taken over the city. The fear of taxation has given way to anticipation for the beard sculpting contest. Families are sewing costumes. Guards are rehearsing choreography, and they say that even the queen is discreetly braiding a wig with golden threads just to get into the spirit. You pass through the palace gate and find the king in the garden. He is watching two children practicing with fake beards made of rope. One of them trips. He laughs. It's going to be a disaster, he says, in the happiest tone you've ever heard. It will be a memory, you answer. He nods. I think I've discovered something. A decree imposes, but a festival is contagious. Historians still debate whether such festivals actually arose from absurd tax reforms or whether they were romanticized over time. But many accounts point to celebrations that were born precisely to mock past laws, and that, ironically, made kings more popular than any military campaign. The king looks at you. Get ready. Tomorrow, you will parade with me. I want you to carry the banner of the first free beard. Which one is the first? The one that fell off my face last night. You laugh, and you realize something rare has happened. The people did not just forgive a real mistake. He turned it into a reason to celebrate. The morning of the festival arrives with the smell of sweet bread and anticipation. You wake before sunrise to the sound of muffled chants echoing through the streets, makeshift. Choirs rehearsing hymns in honor of the village's most famous beards. Opening the inn's door, you're greeted by a procession of children dressed in tunics made of dyed sackcloth, each wearing a false beard made of wool wrapped with dried flowers. Yes, the entire city has decided to embrace madness. You walk towards the main square, where a stage has been erected on top of stacked barrels, covered with carpets patched with royal symbols and wooden combs. In the center of the square, a pillar has been erected. On it, a wooden sculpture representing a giant beard, its locks braided like golden serpents. The local artisans have really outdone themselves. You are taken backstage at court, where the king is being dressed as a mythological figure, a teal robe with metallic threads hanging from the shoulders, a gently tilted crown, and, of course, a fake beard glued on with scented resin. Here's just for the symbolism, he says, smiling. You're also dressed in a simple but elegant ceremonial robe and given a plaque that reads, "Bearer of the first redeemed beard." Yes, it glows. The festival begins, to the sound of flutes and drums. Citizens pass through the main street in their themed costumes. There are knights with beards made of chicken feathers. There is a lady dressed as the soap spirit, floating among bubbles. And a baker has created an entire helmet made of bread, shaped into a mustache. You laugh. Everyone laughs. Even the old tax collector, who now hands out razor-shaped candy. On stage, the king gives a speech, not a decree, an actual speech. He talks about how power can be arrogant, how sometimes a good idea in theory is a disaster in practice, and how a pigeon, or in this case, a people, can always change direction. Historically, few kings have admitted their mistakes publicly, and even fewer have done so in front of laughing crowds. But when they have often earned something rare, true affection. The highlight of the morning comes with the parade of notable beards. Among them are a gentleman who has never shaved his beard since the king was born, a 12-year-old boy with a charcoal-painted mustache, and surprise, the queen, wearing a necklace made entirely of artistically braided hair. At the end, you go on stage with the king. "Present the banner," he says. You hold up the cloth embroidered with the image of a razor crossed with a feather, and the crowd responds with an unexpectedly emotional ovation. Children throw petals into the air, a dog barks, and a barber tosses a packet of handmade soap like confetti. It is at this moment that you realize it all started with a fee, an absurd tax. But it became something much more lasting, a rite of union, of play, of shared memory. And perhaps that's the secret of stories that survive the test of time. They don't have to be logical. They just have to make people remember and smile. The afternoon falls with a lazy slowness, as if time too has been seduced by the festival atmosphere. The colors of the sky change gently, from gold to amber, and then to soft shades of lilac and pinkish gray. You walk through the now quiet streets, feeling the echoes of laughter still vibrating in the stones. The banners still flutter in the windows. The smell of sweet bread and candle wax still floats in the air. And in every corner of the city, small groups gather to tell their favorite versions of what happened, as if the beard tax had already become a legend, with dozens of alternative versions. You find yourself in front of the small central fountain, where the reflection of the king's ceremonial beard, now resting on a makeshift shelf, seems to smile with a certain relief. There he is, the king, sitting on a stone bench, with the crown in his hands and his feet bare. He looks at you with a serene weariness, as if he has finally understood what cannot be made to happen: spontaneous affection. Do you still think it was a bad idea? You ask. He hesitates, then shrugs. It was a bad idea, but a useful mistake. He smiles. Maybe I should declare a holiday for every disastrous decision I make. You pretend to reflect. There will be a lack of calendar. You laugh. Historically, there are records of kings who redeemed themselves with parties, not because of nobility, but because of strategy. Governing requires power, but maintaining the people requires humanity. And maybe that's what this king discovered, that you can be feared or loved, but it's very difficult to be both without learning to laugh at yourself. Later, back at the inn, you rest your head on a pillow stuffed with dried lavender, leaves. Outside, the sound of the last festivities comes like a joyful whisper. A lute plays an improvised melody poorly, and someone is telling the story of the bravest beard in the kingdom who faced the wind and did not give in. You close. Your eyes remember the first time you heard about the beard tax. Okay, it seemed ridiculous, it still does, but now you understand it wasn't about the money, it was about control, and then about losing it, and discovering there's something better in its place. You sigh. The festival ends tomorrow. But the story is already guaranteed. It will be told for generations, retold in the squares, illustrated in the fabrics of storytellers, embroidered on the cloaks of merchants. And yes, even dramatized by traveling theater troupes, who will perform increasingly exaggerated versions. The king is perhaps remembered as the bearded one, even without a beard, or he who taxed the people's faces. Or who knows, just the king who knew how to laugh last. And you will be remembered as someone who listened, observed, and understood, and in the end, that's enough. Night finally falls with the solemn weight of an end that no one wants to name. It is the last night of the festival, and there is something in the breeze that carries both the scent of wilting flowers and a faint taste of anticipated longing. The lamps are lit with more care, as if each flame deserved to last just a little longer. You walk through the alleys that now seem to have memorized the steps of the people, as if the ground is also dancing along to the last bars of the celebration. Near the southern wall, a small makeshift stage draws a crowd. It's the Tilk brothers, troupe, famous for dramatizing recent events with an absurd mix of truth, exaggeration, and inside jokes. As you get closer, the scene is a musical comedy with fake beards for all the characters, including the princess, who enters the scene with a braided red beard and declares dramatically, "If you love me, show it on your face. And if you can't, pay the tax." The audience bursts into laughter. The king watches hidden under a large hood, and although he tries to maintain his composure, you can see him laughing with his eyes. At some point, he spots you in the crowd and discreetly raises a glass of wine in your direction, as if to say, "Yes, I deserve it." Later, on the way back to the inn, you notice that the city has changed. Not in the stones, the houses, or the banners still hanging, but in the air. There is a new lightness, as if an invisible weight has been lifted from the people's shoulders, and all this because of a mistake, a decree that began as an imposition and ended as a metaphor. Perhaps the best learning comes this way, disguised as nonsense. You find the fountain again, now silent, the water reflecting stars in soft tremors. You sit on the edge, watching your own distorted image. There is no more crowd, no music, no laughter, just the whisper of the water and the sound of your thoughts. In the stillness of the night, you understand something new. Not every ruler is remembered for his deeds, but a rare few are remembered for the mistakes that made him more human, and that, ironically, is what makes them great. The next morning, the festival ends without haste. There are no fireworks, no fanfares, just a lazy and nostalgic collective awakening. The merchants dismantle their stalls with the slowness of those who would love another day. Children run through the streets carrying leftover ribbons and forgotten sweets, and the birds, always forgotten in the stories, sing with more presence than usual. You descend into the inn's lobby, where a modest table awaits with fresh bread, fruit, and bitter leaf tea. Beside it, A folded letter rests with your name written on it. The handwriting is hurried but recognizable. It's the king's. For those who showed me that laughing at yourself can be more powerful than bossing others around, you read it calmly. The letter is short, almost informal. The king confesses that he doesn't know if he will remain on the throne. He says he is still thinking about creating a whining tax for those who complain too much, but he swears he is just joking. Or maybe not. At the end of the letter, there is a simple request. If they ever write history, say that I tried. Even when I made mistakes, I tried, and that I learned from the laughter that people gave me back. You fold the paper carefully, as if you were packing something fragile. Sometimes great moments are not accompanied by applause. They come like this, discreet, almost shy but deeply impactful. Outside, the main square is slowly falling apart. The ceremonial beard was taken off the shelf and given to an old craftsman, who swears he will turn it into a wooden sculpture, so that no one will ever forget the beard that united the people. The banners are taken down, the ribbons collected, but the feeling, that remains. And you feel like you've somehow participated in something that only happens once in a generation. You leave the city before noon, carrying little but your souvenirs, the folded letter, and the lingering scent of lavender on your clothes. The road winds through quiet fields, the city slowly disappearing behind you like the sweet smoke of a dying candle. The road is long, but your mind continues to celebrate. Months later, stories begin to arrive in other cities, first in the form of troubadour songs that exaggerate everything. They say that the king became bald by decree, that taxes were paid with golden mustaches, that a goat was crowned by mistake. Then come embroidered cloths, comedies staged at fairs, and finally, a book, The King's Beard, Chronicles of a Hairy Empire. No one knows who wrote it. Some say it was you under a pseudonym. Others claim it was the king himself disguised as a poet. There are even those who believe it was written by the beard, who came to life and wanted to tell his version of the facts. But the important thing is that the story spreads, and with it, the message. Governing without listening is like shaving your face in the dark. Eventually, you'll cut yourself. You hear rumors that the king never decreed another tax without first taking advice. They say he set up a council of barbers, just for fun, and that Beard Day became an official date in the royal calendar, with games, plays, and even a philosophical beard contest, won by a peasant who recited a poem about freedom and grey hair. And you? You continue your journey, but every now and then in a new city someone asks you, have you heard the story of the king who tried to tax faces? And you just answer, yes, I heard, and smile, as someone who knows that some stories no longer belong to anyone, because they already belong to everyone. Months have passed since the festival. The seasons have changed with the patient punctuality of an old butler, and now the gentle warmth of spring once again fills the fields surrounding the kingdom. Shy flowers sprout on the slopes, as if first checking whether it is still safe to grow. And in the midst of this new season, the king calls something unprecedented, a meeting of barbers, tailors, actors, chroniclers, and 2 peasants, an unlikely council, gathered not by nobility of blood, but by symbolic relevance. He calls it the Council of Short Shadows, an allusion to the shaved beards and reduced egos. You are invited to watch, not as an advisor, but as an observer. A chair at the back of the room, no name, no prominence. But no one doubts that your presence carries weight. The hall where the council meets was once the old tax hall, a cold place filled with tables where tax collectors made accounts and made threats in the same tone. Now renovated, it is filled with light tapestries, climbing plants, and open windows, as if the king wanted to show that even places can change their functions, just like people. The advice begins with laughter. A barber proposes that every new law be tested first in a play, to see if it sounds ridiculous. A chronicler suggests that each decree be accompanied by a poem. The peasant woman asks for more open-air markets, so that the voice of the people can smell of fruit and sound of music. The king listens to everything with a tired but attentive smile. He has changed. Not in his clothes, he still wears his robes and maintains a dignified posture, but in his eyes. There is a sparkle there that was not there before, something between humility and admiration. During a break, you find him alone, near the balcony. I didn't think they'd take the name seriously, you comment. Council of Short Shadows sounds like a joke, and yes, but look. He points to the group gathered in the distance. These are the only shadows I really want to see in my court right now. The small ones, the ones that don't scare anyone. You laugh. He continues, I discovered that there is a difference between respect and obedience. A king can give orders, yes, but being truly heard that only comes when you stop shouting. That afternoon, no law was enacted, no taxes discussed, but the kingdom has changed more than in many previous decades. Because there, in an old hall of threats, something new sprouted, listening. The Council of Short Shadows would become a tradition, and every time the king was tempted to act out of vanity, he would return to that hall and hear again the voices that laughed at him and laughed with him. The night now envelops everything like a soft veil of dark blue velvet. The torches go out one by one, like tired stars after a long vigil. You lie wrapped in silence except for that soft, distant noise, perhaps a brave cricket, perhaps just the wind. Her breathing slows, as if she herself were listening to the story once again, with the same serene enchantment as someone contemplating a patiently embroidered tapestry. Outside, beards are no longer worth tax. They dance freely in the wind, with proud chins and carefree laughter. The people sleep more lightly, and even the whispers in the castle corridors seem to have forgotten to fear. You remember Egyptian feathers, messenger pigeons, mysterious seashells in forgotten monasteries. It all seems to connect, as if these stories, absurd or quiet, exist to remind you of something essential, that even the smallest moments have value. That rest comes not from the absence of movement, but from the lightness of the spirit. And now, enveloped by this lightness, you surrender to sleep, as if signing a silent treaty with time. Nothing rushes you. Nothing demands anything from you. Everything is exactly where it should be. Good night.